I delved deeper into the research of the yokai, known as Kasha. I couldn't help but feel a certain irresistible shiver. It was not merely a physical fear of a corpse being snatched away, but rather a sense of being confronted with the profound depth of human karma, the idea that we cannot escape judgment or retribution, even at the very end of our lives. No matter how much science advances or how much the laws of the universe are unraveled, the darkness that lies beyond the black box of death remains a sanctuary that no one can touch. The existence of the Kasha might be like sharp claws reaching out from that very darkness. Will we truly be able to fall into a peaceful slumber at the moment the curtain falls on our lives, or will we hear the sound of wheels engulfed in hellfire? Now, let me lead you into the tale of the messenger from hell, passed down since ancient times. It was a night when heavy rain lashed the ground, as if the heavens themselves were wailing. Thunderclaps tore through the sky in every direction, radiating an intimidating presence that drowned out all the noise on earth. And every time its sharp light flashed, the houses of the village shrouded in pitch-black darkness emerged in a pale blue glow. In such an unsettling atmosphere, in a corner of a certain village, a funeral was being held quietly, yet in a heavy air. The deceased was an elderly man who lived alone and had a bad reputation in the village. In life, he had completely cut off contact with his neighbors, and moreover, had repeatedly made remarks mocking the misfortunes of others. Therefore, the faces of the relatives in attendance showed a sense of relief that the nuisance was finally settled, and a sense of formal obligation rather than sadness. Inside the chilled hall, the smoke of incense hung low, and the moisture-laden air clung to the skin. As the sound of chanting mixed with the sound of rain and was repeated in a monotonous rhythm, it was the moment when the relatives proceeded in turn to the front of the coffin to say their quiet last goodbyes. Suddenly, a tremendous impact sound that shook the roof of the building echoed through the air, followed by a giant wheel engulfed in crimson flames, descending as if breaking through the skylight. It was more like a hellfire meant to burn away souls, emitting an ominous radiance that did not seem to belong to this world, rather than physical fire. The surroundings were instantly filled with pungent, acrid smoke and a heat wave so intense it paralyzed reason. The mourners, who had been maintaining silence, screamed at the extraordinary situation and fell into a panic, seeking an exit. Amidst the hellish scene where people fleeing fell and piled on top of each other. By the time the smoke finally began to thin, an unbelievable sight had unfolded. The coffin, which was supposed to be seated in the center of the altar and strictly closed with nails, was miserably destroyed as if it had exploded from the inside, and the interior was empty. The remains of the old man who had been lying there just a few minutes ago had not even a scrap of clothing left, and only the smell of charred wood fragments and tatami mats exposed to unusually high temperatures filled the room. One old woman who witnessed it muttered in a trembling voice, "It's the Kasha. The Kasha took him away. This is the work of the Kasha, a yokai that has been feared more deeply than the darkness of night in villages across Japan since ancient times. The Kasha has been passed down as an unspeakably terrifying existence that appears during the middle of a funeral, the most sacred and defenseless moment when the living send off the dead to snatch away the corpse. Why do they so persistently target corpses? And what is the true identity of the one who drives those wheels of fire? Tonight, let us delve deep into the bottomless darkness of the Kasha, said to be both a special envoy from hell and an incarnation of resentment lingering in this world. Regarding the appearance of the Kasha, a wide variety of traditions have been recorded in essays and picture scrolls from various parts of Japan since ancient times. The most established general image is that of a demon-like figure standing atop a giant wheel engulfed in fiercely blazing flames, or the wheel itself transformed into a monster. However, as we dig deeper into its true identity, a connection with a surprisingly familiar animal emerges: the cat. In particular, the theory that an old pet cat gains spiritual power over many years and transforms into a Kasha exists strongly in various regions across the country, from Tohoku to Kyushu. Why cats? Since ancient times, cats have been believed to be animals with very strong spiritual sensitivity, capable of moving freely between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Taboos such as the idea that a corpse will start moving if a cat jumps near it, or that a cat should not be allowed near a corpse, are sometimes heard, even at modern funeral sites, as poignant lessons beyond mere superstition. This may be because the cat's supple, silent movements and its eyes that shine even in the dark reminded people of denizens of the other world. A cat that has become a Kasha transforms into a giant creature, rips open the coffin with sharp claws, and easily lifts the body, with its superhuman strength to vanish beyond the clouds. The descriptions told as omens of the Kasha's appearance are all very specific and stimulate the five senses. The peaceful sky suddenly turns a deep, bruised black at a certain moment, and begins to swirl as if the sky itself is writhing in pain. Subsequently, a violent gust of wind that swirls up leaves and knocks down great trees blows wildly, and if you can see the shadow of a giant reddish-black glowing beast mixed in that wind, it is already a sign of the inescapable end. In an instant, the Kasha breaks through the roof, nullifies even protective barriers, and reaches the coffin. Its power is so overwhelming that the people around cannot move a single finger, and can only witness the body of their precious family member being snatched away while frozen in absolute terror. What is left after the Kasha departs are only charred tatami mats, giant claw marks carved into the ceiling, and people trembling with an unfillable sense of loss and fear after losing the remains of their loved one. What if the beloved cat purring at your feet right now were to suddenly clothe itself in flames and soar into the sky? What if hellfire dwelled in the depths of those amber eyes? Have you ever felt such an anxiety, even once? The story of a familiar pet animal transforming into the most terrifying executioner of death, the moment certain conditions are met, tells us how fragile the sandcastle of our daily lives truly is. It is said that there is a clear criterion for the prey targeted by the Kasha. It is the corpse of a so-called sinner who, in life, committed every imaginable atrocity and enriched themselves by making others suffer. Based on the Buddhist view of life and death, souls reincarnate through the 6 realms, according to their deeds in life, but it is thought that those with particularly heavy sins need to be collected by the jailers of hell, while still in the stage of this world even before falling into hell. The Kasha serves as a sort of express delivery service to hell, carrying the remains directly into the flames of agonizing cries, without even waiting for judgment. This can be said to be the embodiment of the strict sense of ethics known as karmic retribution, taking the form of a yokai. However, when examining the traditions closely, an even more terrifying side emerges. It is not necessarily only the wicked who are targeted. There have been reports of cases where even a good person, who was loved like a saint by the villagers, or even an innocent child, was attacked by the Kasha due to bad luck at the moment of death. A slight carelessness by the bereaved, or a mistake like a quota adjustment on the hell side. This symbolizes a fear so irrational that even the logic of justice being rewarded, which we want to believe in, does not apply. To have one's corpse stolen is not merely to lose a physical body, it means having the opportunity for proper memorial services. Stolen forever, the path to the soul's enlightenment. Severed, and being forced to wander through the flames of hell for eternity. For the bereaved family, the disappearance of the remains during a funeral means carrying the unbearable regret for the rest of their lives, that they could not fulfill their responsibility as those left behind. According to an old record passed down in a certain village, a gruesome description remains that, a few days after being taken by the Kasha, lumps of flesh and the cruelly torn-off limbs of a human fell from the sky along with a rain of blood. Was that the wreckage of the prey eaten by the Kasha in its haste on the way to hell? Or was it a staged performance meant to show the living the severity of hell? We might need to constantly ask ourselves how our way of living is reflected in the eyes of heaven. To prevent such attacks by the Kasha, people in various parts of Japan, since ancient times have racked their brains and taken a wide variety of measures. The most famous among them, practiced in many regions, was the ritual of placing a sharply honed razor on top of the coffin. It was believed that the Kasha, or the demon cat that is its true identity, has a nature that extremely dislikes the coldness of metal and the sharp brilliance of blades. The razor was not a mere tool, it was a symbol of protection that cuts through the darkness, serving as the last fortress to protect the deceased. It was also not uncommon to wrap the coffin multiple times, with thick prayer beads or invite a high-ranking monk to burn special ritual fires, goma, and maintain a barrier throughout the night. Furthermore, what is interesting is the custom of double funerals, nidoso, performed in some regions. This was a method that could be called a sophisticated psychological war to deceive the eyes of the Kasha. First, they prepare a fake coffin containing only weights and hold a fake funeral, conspicuously, accompanied by loud musical instruments and the loud wailing of professional mourners. After the Kasha bites into the fake coffin and leaves in anger upon finding the inside empty, they then hold the actual burial quietly in the middle of the night, without anyone knowing. What people tried so hard to protect was the dignity of their loved one, and the assurance of a place where the departed soul could rest in peace, the final form of love from the living. Modern funerals have become efficient and simplified, and it has become standard for them to be held in clean and quiet funeral halls. However, in an era when the entire village was in mourning and the body was carried while lighting torches in the darkness, the fear people felt was more poignant than we in the modern age can imagine. The prayers placed in a single razor or a string of beads were an expression of defensive instinct against invisible threats that science could never measure. We, while living in a convenient world, might have forgotten such vigilance against the darkness. However, isn't the Kasha still watching for a gap in the moment we become careless and lose our faith? Unlocking historical documents reveals that essayists and cultural figures of the Edo period also held an extraordinary interest in the Kasha. Particularly famous is Suzuki Bokushi's Hokuetsu Seppu, which details the life and customs of the snowy country of Echigo. This book contains an account of a Kasha sighting in a snowbound mountain village, written with surprisingly precise brushstrokes. It describes physical phenomena, such as how, when a Kasha appeared amidst a sudden clouding of the sky and terrifying lightning during a funeral, the surrounding temperature instantly rose to a midsummer-like heat, and the snow that had been piled several meters deep melted in an instant, leaving the ground flooded. These are all testimonies too specific and vivid to be dismissed as mere hallucinations or hearsay. For the people of that time, the Kasha was by no means a resident only of stories. It was recognized as a fear like a tangible disaster that could befall one's own body at any time, just like a lightning strike or a flood. Additionally, interestingly, there are traditions that the Kasha persistently targets specific bloodlines. This is the idea that the mistakes committed by ancestors or the abominable karma passed down through a family becomes a guidepost that attracts the Kasha across generations. Even if you yourself have lived a perfectly blameless life, a fate of being consumed by the flames of hell awaits you because of the inescapable chain of blood connection. This inescapable darkness of lineage might be the core of the true terror held by the Kasha legend. On the other hand, attempts to analyze the true identity of the Kasha from a modern scientific perspective never cease. For example, the violent rain and wind and gusts that are almost always described when the Kasha appears can be interpreted as the result of localized downbursts or violent updrafts associated with cumulonimbus clouds. If a wooden coffin catches fire due to a lightning strike, and that pillar of fire is swept high into the sky by a tornado, it would look exactly like a wheel of fire vanishing into the sky. Regarding the phenomenon of the body disappearing, the possibility cannot be denied that the fact of a wild dog or a large beast snatching the body before burial was amplified by fear and supplemented in the brain as the work of a yokai. However, by dismissing all mysteries as mere misidentification of natural phenomena, are we not losing something important? The wider the range illuminated by science, the deeper and darker the shadows created behind that light become. The reason the concept of the Kasha has remained so long and so strongly rooted in the Japanese psyche is precisely because it is not an interpretation of a mere physical phenomenon, but rather a form given to the fundamental fear humans hold toward the absolute end of death, and the sense of self-reflection asking, was my life right? When in an extreme state, do you think the Kasha is a mere personification of lightning? Or do you think it is another reality created by human consciousness, Broadening our perspective further, unique customs also remain in certain regions where the Kasha is worshipped, not as a mere object of fear, but as a very strict purifier of souls. Here, the Kasha is not a thief who steals corpses, but is instead perceived as a strict guide who forcibly pulls the soul away from this world, a place filled with suffering, and forces it to transition to the next stage. Being carried away by the Kasha is, in a sense, a reversal of thinking, an extreme ritual of salvation to burn away all the karma of this world and enter training in hell or rebirth in a brand new state. Of course, that ritual is so violent that it is believed that a single mistake will bring catastrophic calamity to the surroundings. So it remains something treated with a sense of awe. Even for the same yokai called Kasha, it can be a loathsome monster or a sacred executioner depending on the region, faith, or the state of mind of the viewer. This multifaceted nature can be said to reflect the complex and delicate religious views of the Japanese. We are constantly living while swaying between good and evil, light and darkness. What is reflected in the mirror of the Kasha might be the abyss lurking within our own inner selves that we ourselves are unaware of. What you see in those flames when you face death, that is the very shape of the heart that you have built up throughout your life up to that point. Finally, I would like to introduce an unfathomable first-hand account of an encounter with a Kasha in relatively recent times, the modern era. It is an incident that happened when a veteran male employee working for a major funeral company was driving a hearse toward a crematorium in a mountainous area in the middle of a hot and humid summer night. There were no streetlights on the way, and it was a lonely mountain road where he relied only on his headlights. But the moment he happened to glance at the rearview mirror, he received a shock as if his heart had stopped. Reflected, there was a giant, four-legged shadow chasing the car at high speed while emitting a light like a red-hot blazing wheel. The man desperately stepped on the accelerator, but the shadow closed the distance with a movement, as if ignoring gravity, and soon a dull impact, as if something had jumped onto the roof of the car, echoed. At the same time, inside the car, where the air conditioning was supposed to be on at the highest setting, a smell of a beast that caused nausea and a heat wave that seemed to burn the skin filled the air. The driver prepared for death, and while gripping the steering wheel, continued to chant an old sutra. He had been taught by his grandmother until his voice went hoarse. Then, along with the signs of dawn, the shadow vanished like mist, and he reached the crematorium by the skin of his teeth. However, the next morning, when he checked the hearse under the bright sun, he was so shocked he almost lost his strength on the sturdy steel roof. Deep scars, as if torn by sharp claws, were vividly engraved, accompanied by what looked like charred marks. Was this experience a daydream shown by exhaustion? Or is it proof that even as times change and the form of funerals changes, the existence of the Kasha remains unchanged, seeking new prey right beside us? If you should feel an unnatural gust of wind or an impossible heat wave during the middle of a funeral for someone close to you, and hear a low growl like a cat's cry in your ear, at that time only, you must never look up at the sky. For the moment you see it, you may already have ceased to be a resident of this world. What did you think? The Kasha, a terrifying yokai passed down since ancient times that snatches away corpses. Is its true identity literally a fearsome messenger dispatched from hell, or is it an illusion named reaping what one sows that we have projected beyond the inescapable fate of death? One thing that is certain is that no matter how much civilization advances and death becomes institutionalized even in the modern age, the fundamental fear of being judged at the final moment continues to live on and pulse deeply within our hearts without disappearing. To avoid being targeted by the Kasha and dragged into eternal darkness, we should perhaps cherish each day and live with a kind heart toward our neighbors and a pure spirit. If you have any mysterious stories related to funerals or unexplainable strange experiences related to cats around you, please let us know in the comments. Your precious experience might one day become a small light that saves someone's soul. And if you found this story of the Kasha to be of spine-chilling interest, please subscribe to the channel and give it a high rating. Well then, let us meet again in the next mystery, a story of the profound darkness.